Yo, what is up guys, and welcome to my driver rankings for the 2023 Formula 1 season. We're going to be going through every single driver who raced this season and ranking them from worst to best and talking about their overall seasons relative to their car and their teammates. So let's get into it. Starting off with our lowest ranked driver, coming in at 22nd is, of course, Nyck de Vries. Now, a lot of people would say it's unfair that he didn't get a full season, and obviously, of course, not many people deserve to get dropped, but he didn't meet the expectations that were set out for him. His goal was to come into AlphaTauri with the experience he has at the age he's at and be able to match, at the very least, Yuki Tsunoda, which he didn't. He made a lot of mistakes. He was falling short of his teammate in almost every single session. And when you've got Daniel Ricciardo and Liam Lawson sitting on the sidelines, it made a lot of sense for AlphaTauri to drop him mid-season. So moving on to 21st, the driver coming in and last that did a full season is, of course, Logan Sargeant. Now, he was a rookie coming into the season, but he still under-delivered. At the end of the day, did he really do better than Latifi? Now, don't get me wrong, Albon is a great driver, but he's not some top-tier, flawless talent. He's still inexperienced himself. And Logan consistently fell short of him the entire season, getting completely wiped in the qualifying head-to-head, and was always finishing in last in qualifying near the back of the grid in the races and just nowhere near his teammate. Not to mention, almost every single Grand Prix weekend, he made a mistake in multiple sessions. Now, it was good to see him improve at the end of the season, but for me, it was too little, too late, and I'm shocked that he got a seat for 2024. We've seen the likes of other rookies, such as Oscar Piastri, come in their first year and do really, really well. But Logan just did not look comfortable at all. Next up, in 20th, I've got Kevin Magnussen. This was a bit of a surprise, not gonna lie, coming into the season. Obviously, Magnussen's a very experienced driver. He was up against Nico Hulkenberg, who was out of the sport for 3 years. And man, he just seemed completely off the pace of Nico almost the entire season. He definitely did pick it up towards the end, but at that point, the Haas was so far off of the other teams, the opportunity to bring home points was gone. Now, Magnussen did bring home 3 separate point finishes, but he didn't really have a high this season. To be fair, he didn't really have any low points either. It was just very underwhelming in comparison to his teammate the whole year. Moving on, in 19th, I've got Zhou Guanyu. My favorite saying this year was Zhou was just there. He was probably the least talked about driver the entire season. Now, that can be a good thing. He didn't really have any low moments, any major crashes, any major mistakes, but he didn't have any high points either. The only one that comes to mind is in Hungary. He obviously made it through to Q3 and had a really, really good result in qualifying. But other than that, it was just mediocre results, quite off the pace of his teammate most weekends. Overall, it was a tough season for Alfa Romeo, but Zhou needs to make sure he's maximizing that car every weekend. So going from a driver that wasn't talked about much to a driver that majorly undelivered, I've got Lance Stroll in 18th. Now, at the start of the season, the Aston Martin was very, very strong. He did bring home some decent results, but not on the level that car was capable of. He was obviously dealing with a bit of an injury at the time, so it does make a bit of sense. But after that injury healed, he just completely fell off. That midpoint of the season was very, very rough. Now, obviously, Aston Martin did have problems of developing their car, which meant they fell multiple positions in the pecking order. But his teammate was always maximizing the result of the car, while Stroll was going out in Q1s every week and not even making points. Not to mention the countless mistakes and crashes that he did have as well. But unlike the drivers ranked behind, he did have some high moments. A 5th place in Sao Paulo and Las Vegas, as well as some nice charges through the field after a poor qualifying. Overall, though, it was a very disappointing season for Stroll, and it cost Aston Martin a lot in the Constructors' Championship. Moving on to a driver with a very similar season, I've got Sergio Perez in 17th. Yes, he did finish second in the championship, but in comparison to his teammate and where that car should have been, he very much underdelivered. He started the season off strong with a second in Bahrain and Miami and a win in both Saudi Arabia and Azerbaijan. Specifically, Azerbaijan outpacing Verstappen pretty much the whole Grand Prix. But then it started to fall to bits after that horrific Grand Prix in Monaco. Failing to make Q3 and not finishing on the podium when the expectation is to qualify and finish in P2. I'm sorry, Checo, but I hope he finds that comfort next year. Next up, in 16th, I've got Valtteri Bottas. He was quite underwhelming for his standards and the experience he has, but overall, he didn't have a terrible season. It was just a bit meh. I think looking back, his season wasn't anything special, especially with how bad that Alfa Romeo was. But there was a good amount of races where he maximized that car. And unlike the drivers I rank behind, he wasn't making those mistakes. He wasn't having those crashes. And he was at least putting that Alfa Romeo in a position where in some races he was able to get points. Forgetful and underwhelming, but definitely not terrible from Bottas. Next up, I've got Nico Hulkenberg in 15th. Another man hindered by their very poor car, but he actually showed a lot in qualifying. We all know this Haas had terrible race pace, but Nico made the most of it. And Nico showed that consistently throughout the season, out-qualifying his teammate, making Q2, making Q3. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to bring those results home a lot of the time, but like in Australia and the Austria Sprint, he did get points. I definitely think there's an argument you could rate Hulkenberg higher because of how well he did in qualifying, showing off that car. I really hope he keeps his performance up next year and Haas fix their race pace because I feel like there might be some potential here. Next up in 14th, I've got Daniel Ricciardo. He came back mid-season, then disappeared again, then came back. In the end, doing 7 Grand Prix. And I think he did a good job in most of them. Starting off very strong in Hungary, outperforming Tsunoda. Had an amazing weekend in Mexico. But the other 4 were average. And he also had some problems that he couldn't control. I don't think he was convincing enough against Yuki. But he did show that he was much better than his McLaren days. I did rank him higher than the drivers behind because of those high points. But I can't rank him higher than this based off of how many Grand Prix he did. So moving on in 13th, I've got our boy Liam Lawson. Again, another driver doing limited Grand Prix, only doing 5. But wow, what a debut did he have. 13th in Netherlands, beating his teammate on debut. 11th in Italy, out-qualifying all 3 Red Bull cars and getting points in Singapore. And beating his teammate, just missing out on points once again in Japan. Even though we got a limited showing, he killed it in 4 out of the 5 of the Grand Prix, especially for his expectations. And I think it's only fair he gets ranked higher than all the drivers behind. All right, moving on to the mid/top end of the grid now. I've got Esteban Ocon in 12th. He had such an inconsistent season. It doesn't help the amount of issues the team had as well. He obviously had some highs, the podium in Monaco and the 4th place in Las Vegas. But overall, was just super inconsistent in comparison to his teammate Gasly, who's new to the team this year. There was a good handful of results as well where the team just favored him over Gasly or he got lucky. Obviously, he is putting himself in a position to get lucky. But looking solely on performance, I do think he got outpaced by his teammate. And at a team like Alpine, he needs to be maximizing his performances every single week to be making sure he gets as much points as possible. Next up, I've got Yuki Tsunoda in 11th. I think some people say he could be ranked higher, but for me, I thought he had a very overhyped season. He started off the season very strong with those 10th and 11th places in the first 5 races. But you got to keep in mind, they were up against the weak rookie Nyck de Vries. Who knows how good that car actually was. Then he fell asleep for the next 6 races, all the way up until after the summer break. I thought he was quite underwhelming against Liam Lawson, but he picked it up again at the end of the season against Daniel, finishing with a 9th in Sao Paulo and an 8th in Abu Dhabi. But a Grand Prix like Mexico comes to mind, where he made multiple mistakes, which cost them points in the constructors. I think if you look at Yuki's highs, he could be ranked higher. If you look at his lows, he could be ranked lower. All right, moving on to the top 10. I've got Gasly in 10th. Yes, Alpine dealt with a lot of problems, him causing a couple problems himself, but I thought he maximized that car as much as possible, even bringing home a podium in Netherlands, as well as in the sprint in Belgium. I think he had more bad luck than Ocon, yet still finished ahead in the championship, so for me, that's why I ranked him higher. I think he showed he's now getting comfortable at Alpine, and I can't wait to see how he does in 2024. All right, moving on to the big boys now. I've got George Russell in 9th. Now, I've been defending Russell pretty much the whole year. I do think he's getting a lot more criticism than he deserves. But I think even Russell can admit it wasn't a great season, especially considering how well he did last year in his first year at the top of the grid. He brought home a lot of good 3rd, 4th, and 5th place results, but he didn't maximize that car every weekend. At least not on the level of his teammate Lewis. We also saw a fair few amount of mistakes from him, specifically Singapore, and that final lap comes to mind. Again, I don't think he underperformed this season. I just think he could have done a lot better, and it just wasn't on the level of the drivers in front. So coming in at 8th, I've got Carlos Sainz. He was one of the drivers with some very big highs and was quite consistent, but consistently underwhelming in comparison to his teammate, I'd say. He started off the season trading with Leclerc and race pace and qualifying. We then got to Italy where he looked very comfortable in the car and then went on to win in Singapore. What a race. But those last 7 races, he got absolutely outclassed by Leclerc. And if you look back at Leclerc's season, every time he finished quite high up, Sainz was finishing 2 or 3 positions lower. Like Russell, I don't think he had a bad season. It was just underwhelming in comparison to previous years and in comparison to his teammate. Next up, in 7th, I've got Oscar Piastri. First off, what a rookie season. From an expectation standpoint, he did amazing, and you could rank him higher. But I'm looking more at performances. There's an argument he could be ranked lower, but taking into consideration how well he's done his first year in the car, especially against a teammate of a driver like Lando, I have decided to put him above Sainz and Russell. Whether it was qualifying or a race, he was always finishing near his teammate, getting the best he could out of the car, especially in that midpoint of the season. He also got so unlucky. The amount of times he got taken out or just had some stupid thing happen to him. He definitely could have had better results if it wasn't for those as well. He obviously got a win in the sprint in Qatar. Amazing stuff. But overall, based off of performance, I can't rank him higher than this solely off of the fact that his race pace was weak. He might have only finished 1 or 2 positions off of his teammate, but 20 to 30 second gaps. If it's any other driver, they get criticized, but because it's Piastri and he's a rookie, he was getting let off the hook. He's definitely rookie of the year and the best rookie we've seen in a while, and I cannot wait to see how he does in the future. The fact he's even been ranked higher than the likes of Sainz and Russell in his first season is quite insane. Next up, in 6th, I've got Alex Albon. Albon was super consistent this season. At one point, the car was one of the worst on the grid and he was maximizing results. Then when it got upgrades, he delivered even better results. But I do feel like Albon's season was a little bit overhyped in the sense that people kept thinking this was a Williams, a backmarker car. But at one point, it got past being a backmarker car. It was in the midfield. The expectation was to get points and to be making Q3 and Q2 consistently. I think how bad Logan Sargeant did make Albon look even better than what he actually was. That doesn't mean Albon had a bad season. I mean, I've got him ranked in 6th, but I think ranking him any higher than this is just overlooking how much that Williams improved throughout the season. All right, top 5 time. In 5th, I've got Charles Leclerc. Again, another driver with an underrated season due to the amount of problems that his team caused. For instance, he was on for a podium in Bahrain until his engine blew up, the DSQ in Kota, and then the tragic engine failure before the race even started in Sao Paulo. But just looking at Leclerc's results, the amount of second, thirds, and fourths he got in comparison to his teammate is insane. Not to mention the amount of great qualifyings he had as well. And I think Leclerc showed this season, other than his crash in Miami qualifying, that he's not prone to as many mistakes anymore as other drivers on the grid. All right, in 4th, I have got Lewis Hamilton. It's funny to think Lewis had a bit of an underwhelming season, yet is still coming 4th in the rankings. His standards and expectations are just so high. Not to mention that car was pretty poo to drive for most of the season. But I do feel like there was races and especially qualifying he could have done better. But overall, getting 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th when the car should have been getting those results. And although matching Russell in the teammate head-to-head, he outclassed Russell in race pace for most of the season. I think Lewis being ranked in 4th and not high is less to do with his performance and more about how well the drivers in front did. So moving on to the top 3. In 3rd, I have got Lando Norris. This dude absolutely killed it. Once again, performing at such a high peak for majority of the season. Now, I do want to point out the mistakes that he made at the end of the season. I thought that was very much unlike Lando. I think it was like 5 out of 6 qualifyings he made a mistake. But for majority of the season, he was absolutely flawless, maximizing the car, so many second places, and outpacing his teammate consistently. And I think if it wasn't for the mistakes he made at the end of the season, he could have even been ranked in 2nd. So who came in 2nd? I've got Fernando Alonso. What a season from the old man. Almost every single Grand Prix, I would think, this is where Aston Martin's going to qualify. This is where they're going to finish in the race. And he'd finished exactly there, if not better. The only race I generally think he could have done better was Spain. Every other Grand Prix, he was maximizing that car at the start of the season when it was at the top of the grid, even when it fell off during the mid and end point of the season. He also made pretty much no mistakes and obviously outclassed his teammate. And just the overall level of driving Alonso was doing throughout the year, the overtakes, the defending, it was so amazing to see. So moving on to the top spot, it is of course Max Verstappen. One of, if not the most dominant season ever in Formula 1 and all of sports. just look at the results over here. But he was in the best car on the grid. Okay, where's Perez? Even looking at Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher in their dominant eras with a reliable car, they weren't getting first every single week. Max was practically flawless the entire season. He made a mistake on his banker lap in Saudi Arabia, got outpaced by Perez in Baku, messed up his banker in Miami, and other than that, it was flawless. Even in Singapore, when the car was absolutely poo-poo, he still managed to bring home a 5th place. Obviously, from an entertainment standpoint, we don't want to see dominations like this, but it was so great to witness. Seeing a driver drive on this level, I don't think we'll see that ever again. So that's my rankings for all 22 drivers. Let me know down below in the comments what your top 5 are and if there are any of my rankings that you disagree with. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe for more content like this. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
You got that something, baby, that I can go without, just like a poison in me.